A compass that doesn't point north, you are without doubt the worst pirate I've ever heard of.
But you have heard of me. Jack Sparrow.
Jack the Sparrow.
The best visual effects happen when you use practical effects as a base and digital effects to enhance and augment that base. It was beautifully demonstrated in Pirates of the Caribbean 3 at the World's End. In the Maelstrom battle scene, because even though the scene would require dozens of actors and stunt people to interact with dozens of CG characters, in a fight scene with explosions and rain and people swinging to and fro from two different ships inside a massive whirlpool of CG water, they still tried to do as much as they could practically. And so they built two full-size ships, which took 600 people 3 months to build and required nearly 500 tons of steel. That's about the weight of 2 Statues of Liberty. And in order to get the ships to rise and tilt, they put them on the biggest hydraulic gimbals ever used in filmmaking. These gimbals required 600 meters of hydraulic hoses, pumping nearly 4,000 liters of fluid. Then, to be able to light the scene properly, they built the biggest concentration of lights ever used in the industry. In total, 1,400 space lights were needed to cover 45,000 square meters of space, and 9 10,000 amp generators were needed to power it all, along with miles and miles of cable. But even after having a location for the scene to take place and a way of lighting it, they still needed to create the ambience, and so they added huge amounts of rain, ocean spray, smoke, explosions, wind and flying debris. Interestingly, what this really achieved was a harsh reality that pirates in this situation would have actually felt. The actors were wet and cold, so they were really feeling miserable. Their costumes were heavy and sticking to them, making their movements slower and harder. They were really getting splashed by spray and trying to avoid being hit by flying debris. And now, instead of just acting, they were also reacting. They weren't just pretending to be on a moving ship, but instead were trying very hard not to slip and fall, and they weren't just imagining that they were pirates in a storm, but instead fighting to survive it. A scene that perhaps demonstrates best the complexity involved in the VFX of Pirates of the Caribbean is the ghost shark scene in Dead Men Tell No Tales. This scene actually had to be shot in 3 different locations. One was on an island location, shot with a drone, and used for the various backgrounds of the scene. Another shot was in a small water tank in front of a blue screen. This part was used when the actors or the boat had to directly interact with the water. And the last was on an interior blue screen soundstage with the rowboat on a gimbal. Different parts of these 3 shots were then composited along with CG water elements and of course the digital ghost shark models, which were made by scanning the practical puppets used on set and then doing a digital takeover where they impact with the water, which was also CG.
The real magic of these flicks is the monsters. The Pirates of the Caribbean movies boast a rogues gallery of creepy villains, but who's in makeup and which ones are the product of digital magic? Captain Salazar is one gooey ghoul.
I always leave one man alive to tell the tale. Find Sparrow for me and relay a message from Capitan Salazar.
But just how did the filmmakers manage to turn Javier Bardem into nightmare fuel? Most of that credit goes to the makeup artists for sticking with paint and prosthetics for the most part. Of course, this is still a Hollywood blockbuster. Naturally, some digital pizzazz was added to Salazar and his gang of ghosts to make them look even scarier.
This is prosthetics that we've applied. As you can see, it's curling back, and that to get this effect, to get this 3D effect.
They also had to use CGI for one of Salazar's grosser characteristics. Get ready to lose your mind over this one.
You can see him with dots on his face, so that when we finally see him, all that side of his head will be actually blown off. There won't be anything there at all.
Davy Jones is entirely a CGI creation. I mean, that much is obvious, right?
Do you feel this?
If you think Salazar is impressive, wait till you get a load of Davy Jones. He's a CGI creation, but bringing the sexy squid to life still demanded a strong human performance from actor Bill Nighy. The process essentially saw the filmmakers use motion capture to create the tentacled terrorizer, which meant Bill had to rock a groovy bodysuit and walk around the set with markers on his face.
The crew are not bound to me. They are bound to the Dutchman. And the Dutchman must have a captain.
Additionally, Nighy wore makeup on his lips and around his mouth to help the motion capture pick up his speaking patterns. And the end result is one of the best computer-generated creations of its era.
The more you can do practically in camera, the more reference material you're going to have, and the less you end up having to do digitally. And this becomes perhaps most apparent in the fight scene between Jack Sparrow and Davy Jones. Obviously, Davy Jones is a fully CG character and had to be done digitally, and obviously they can't really fight up on the yardarm, if only just for safety reasons, and obviously big sweeping shots like this one are too long and extensive to do practically, and so better to do digitally. But animating a fully digital Johnny Depp would have been complicated, time-consuming and less convincing, and it would have also meant that there would have been nothing real left in the scene to convince us that what we were watching was real. So Johnny learnt the fight choreography on a yardarm on set. Then they filmed him and a stuntman in a mocap suit fighting in the rain. Then they captured all the close-up shots and camera moves. So now, even though the backgrounds, Davy Jones himself, the mast, the sails and the yardarm ended up being recreated digitally, Johnny Depp's performance anchors them all to reality. You can see this actually happen in the initial swooping shot. If we play it slowly right up until this point here, the shot is 100% CGI. Even Jack Sparrow is a digidouble. But then they used this piece of rigging to cross in front of them so they could transition to the live action Johnny fighting on set. Starting on the basis that the crew lived at the bottom of the sea and had mutated, they began designing the crew members to be covered in mollusks and shells. But they soon realized that in order for them to be realistic, they had to at least resemble the actors playing them. So they picked different sea creatures to match each actor's physical attributes and personality. The attention to detail applied to every aspect, the drive to improve and strive for perfection, and the unwillingness to settle for anything less.
But eventually, the legendary sea monster was brought to life through a mix of both practical and visual effects. In the scene where the Kraken crushes the ship, the crew used a combination of explosives and 2 huge pipes filled with 30,000 pounds of cement to pull off the actual crushing, and afterward replace them with the CG tentacles in the final cut.
And I don't think it's Kraken anyways. Always heard it said.
Of the ocean, all of the crew and equipment still needed to be nearby. That meant putting the entire production on a barge, with a 20-minute boat ride to and from set. It was no cakewalk for the actors either. The sand there was super wet thanks to the tide, making it very difficult to run and fight across the beach for take after take after take.
They did manage to make us believe some pretty incredible things. They made us believe that stones were crabs, that there were multiple Jack Sparrows, and that you can tip over a ship by running from side to side. But best of all, they made us believe in an epic swashbuckling pirate tale without ever setting sail.